Okay, we are then on page 209 and coming up to the Enlightenment. It would have been good to finish off Roger Williams and others Baptists in early America and then just start talking about the Enlightenment. That's a whole big subject all by itself. Although, okay, but we'll get into that. Okay, so one of the things that is critical at the time that Baptists were getting really started in America is the idea, and we've said this before, about how the persecuted became the persecutors. It's like they came over, the Puritans came over for religious freedom for themselves so that they were not being held under the strictures of the state church, but then they became the state churches. And it's something that they just sort of naturally gravitated into. That's what they all thought at the time. That was the power structures of the day. It's only since the American Revolution that we have really the whole sense of true religious freedom. So we come up to then Baptists in early America. They really take off after the American Revolution. That's when they really take off. Okay, so paragraph 594 on page 209. And by the way, these are my speaker's notes that I've got here, and so I'll add things on as I ad lib. It's not totally a history book. Remember, we do have some of these history books that we've made available online. Let me see, what are they called again? A History of the Baptists by Armitage, Manual of Church History. You can also go to the ccel.org website. That's Calvin College. I can't remember the EL, what it means. And they have a number of books that are available at the website. And I believe it is Schaff's Church History. I think that's the author. And you can look it up by author. Yes, ccel.org. Yes. They have all kinds of original documents. And Schaff's Church History, and let me get it up on the screen, make sure I know what I'm talking about. That's an extensive church history book, I think several volumes, if I remember correctly. No, there's pro-Calvinist stuff, but they have other stuff because they're a college and they're trying to be having things available. Let me see. Browse. Authors. Yes. Philip Schaff, yes. And he has got volumes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 13 volumes of oh no, that's religious knowledge. Oh, there it is. History of the Christian Church, volumes 1 to 8. And there will be an awful lot of original documentation that goes on, along with that. So that's just for the sake of having things like that. And I quote from him sometimes in the book here. Okay, so again, I'm just working off of these. These are actually the speaker's notes, and I thought it would be great for everybody to have them. That's why we have the book. So that's why it says class notes on it there. So you didn't have to write the notes down yourself. You can just write in the wide margins extra things that you'd like to have. Okay, so Baptists in early America got off to a slow start due to the suppression in various locations, and you can read about that back on page 207. In 1631, and this is where things start to really, like a critical point in American history, it's right here. In 1631, the highly educated Puritan minister Roger Williams arrived in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Do you know who, by the way, the first governor of Rhode Island was in colonial Rhode Island? It was Roger Williams. Okay. Yeah. He was not only a minister, but he became the governor there. Williams held dissenting views on religious matters. He believed that the Church of England was corrupt and that the King of England had no right to grant land in the New World without first purchasing it from the Native Americans. Okay, so remember, the Puritans, they were kind of like dissenters coming over for some freedom. So he's nothing more than another Puritan minister who's also got some dissenting views, and this is one of them. He also argued for the complete separation of church and state, which was a radical idea at the time. Remember, this is what is the problem of the Sardis age, is that they're still maintaining the church state. It is no longer the Roman state. Now it is the individual states, France and Germany and England, and those Protestants were still vying for power along with the state, to share with the state. So he openly criticized the religious establishment and government of the Massachusetts Bay Colony for its failure to completely break away from the Church of England and its oppressive treatment of religious dissenters. So what did they do? Well, they kicked him out of the colony. Okay, so paragraph 595, Williams' outspoken views and criticisms led to his banishment from the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1635. The colony's leaders believed that his ideas posed a threat to their religious and political authority. And it's true, it does. Okay, but you don't want to have forced or coerced religion. So it was a threat to them. But it's also the way to have things thrive. I heard it said recently that one of the reasons why some of the communist countries did not develop, or other countries did not develop, though they had the same technology that we had available to us, they didn't thrive because you have to have advancement in technology along with free market systems. So the technology doesn't advance a country. It is where you have free market systems, and so this is the idea of free market systems is very tied up in a lot of what I go to talk about when I talk about the church in the world. Just as you have free markets financially, we need free markets of ideas in the microphones. There they are up there. Free markets in religion as well. Brother Joe, yes.
Actually, interesting that you bring that up, because as I understand it, the Puritans also tried a form of socialism at some
when
point.
They first came over.
And they just realized that this wasn't going to work because people were more than happy to let other people do their share of the work as well as their own. And they realized really quickly, nope, it doesn't work.
Yes.
So and this was if the system is so good, it should have worked there, because if this is the best system, it was a small group of people and it wouldn't have been, infected by largesse or anything like that. So, but yeah, they just realized very quickly that, when you have a system like that, there are people who are going to work, people who are not going to work, and the people who don't work are happy to let the people who want to work, but then the people who are working are not happy to be working and pulling the share of themselves as well as the others, and it just broke down real quickly.
Yeah, so they had that as part of their history that could have given them a clue later on when it comes to religion. But when you're dealing with religion, people are arguing and fighting for the sovereignty of God and not having to be disrespected. They don't realize you need free ideas. Somebody has complained about diversity means diversity, equity, and inclusion means you have 50 people with 50 shades of pink to dark tan, but they all have the same idea. Okay, they don't have diversity of ideas, and this is what's so absolutely necessary. So after being banished, Williams and a small group of followers settled in an area he called Providence in what is now Rhode Island. And he did not have an easy go of it. He had no Wawa supermarkets. He just had the Wawa Indians. I don't know about that. But anyhow, he did get help from them as he traveled away. There he established a colony that was founded on the principles of religious freedom, tolerance, and the separation of church and state. If you look on page 210 for a moment, well, let me see. Oh, okay, the bottom of page 209, that last bullet point, this colony and its idea of freedom was coincidental with the English Civil War. That's why he was able to get the audience with the Parliament and others at the time, was because they were fighting for these principles over in England. The thing you want to remember about the English Civil War, we don't know about that. I got exposed to the English Civil War when studying for church history, when I was studying some other topics on politics, and really it was amazing, because remember, in the English Civil War, you had the people that wanted Parliament to have more power instead of the king. They had been fighting over the kings who were trying to exercise their divine right of kings that they believed in. And so the kings were pushing forward. And we can go even a step back before that, when you go back to the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta, a couple of hundred years before, had been established because of trying to enforce the rights of the people. It's not as much as we have today, but that's where the start came from. And that argument followed England for a while to the English Civil War. So in the English Civil War, they came out of it with power that was given to the Parliament and Oliver Cromwell. In that environment, Roger Williams' people come over and say, hey, we'd like to have a colony too, and we'd like our colony to be based on freedom of religion. Now, maybe not as direct as that. And the Parliament was more favorable because they'd been through the English Civil War. So, you see that last bullet point, leveraging the English Civil War, the timing of Rhode Island's charter was significant. The English Civil War had broken out, leading to political turmoil in England. The parliamentarians who were in power at the time were more open to supporting religious dissenters and granting greater freedoms, including religious freedom. So that's why this becomes a big break. Keep in mind, and we'll say this again when we get to it, when we get to the American Revolution, the American Revolution, a lot of the rhetoric of the politicians and the preachers was rhetoric that had come from the English Civil War, so that it is very easily said that the American Revolution is the English Civil War Part 2. Okay, so they were using some of the same ideas, still fighting and succeeding at the American Revolution, but fighting for religious freedom. So our aspects of religious freedom was not just a novel idea that the Americans said, hey, how's about having some religious freedom? This is a well-established line of reasoning from Magna Carta to the English Civil War to Oliver Cromwell and what's called the interregnum, his rule over the Commonwealth of England, and then the monarchy comes back, and then the American Revolution follows. So it's a very tight argument that's there. So paragraph 596, in 1644, Williams secured a charter from the English Parliament for the colony of Rhode Island and Providence plantations, which granted it religious freedom and self-governance. Parliament was able to be convinced to grant a charter in spite of the great general resistance to separation of church and state in that era for several reasons. So now the bullet points. Rhode Island was geographically isolated from the other New England colonies, which meant that it was not under the direct jurisdiction or control of the Massachusetts Bay Colony or other nearby colonies. This isolation allowed Rhode Island to develop its own unique approach to governance and religious freedom. Bullet point number 2, again, I'm on page 209, second bullet point. Several men from Rhode Island, including Roger Williams and Dr. John Clark, who was a prominent Baptist minister and co-founder of Rhode Island, traveled to England to seek recognition, support for the colony's rights. They presented petitions and made the case for religious liberty and self-governance to various English authorities. Rhode Island's representatives in England were able to establish connections with influential figures in the English Parliament who sympathized with the principles of religious freedom. And these connections helped them navigate the political landscape and gain support. Sir Henry Vane, a former governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony who was sympathetic to the cause of religious liberty, played a crucial role in advocating for Rhode Island's case in the English Parliament, and he used his influence to advance the interests of the Rhode Island colonists. So what you've got here is the makings of a perfect storm. All the factors come together. On page 210, on paragraph 597, the charter stated that no person within the said colony at any time hereafter shall be anywise molested, punished, disquieted, or called in question for any differences in opinion in matters of religion. So you can see that sentiment there. It's going to be very, very well received at the American Revolution. Paragraph 598, Dr. John Clark and others established the Second Baptist Church in Newport, Rhode Island, making it the Second Baptist congregation in the New World. And both of those churches are still in operation today. And I have no idea whether they're liberal or conservative or whatever, but they are still there. Let me see if okay. What's interesting is that the first synagogue in America was established, you want to guess where? Rhode Island? You got it right. Because of the religious freedom aspect. So it was the birth of anti-Semitism. Okay. So there was slow growth in America of the Baptist churches at this point. Slow growth. So there was growth of Baptist churches in New Hampshire and New Jersey due to less restrictive attitudes. Before the Great Awakening, there were several associations that had formed. And I want to point out, look at the last bullet point under that. The Welsh Tract Church in Newark, Delaware, founded in 1701, is one of the oldest Baptist churches in America, founded by Welsh Baptists. Although not an association, it was greatly influential in church planning in its area. And I would drive by, I would ride by, I should say, on the school bus past that Welsh Tract Church in Delaware, in Newark, Delaware. It's off of road, yeah, it's still open. It's a small little building. In fact, when I was doing this, I looked it up online, and you can see things about it. Not exactly of our character, but yeah, it's still operating. The Welsh Tract Church. Okay, so the first bullet point, and here we see what's happening is the growth of Baptist associations. Though there was slow growth at the time, and it's going to be explosive growth after the Revolution, but they were already forming associations, and this is one of the very significant characters of Baptist churches. This is up after paragraph 599, the bullet points. So the Philadelphia Baptist Association, founded in 1707, is one of the earliest Baptist associations in America, included churches in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. So you notice that it's called an association. Later on, you'll hear the word conventions, which is about the same thing as an association, because you do not have a denomination. You do not have the Philadelphia Baptist Church. Okay, it's an association of churches, staying true to Baptist polity of separation between the churches. Second bullet point, the Charleston Baptist Association in South Carolina is believed to have been established before 1733, making it one of the earliest associations in the South. The Charleston Baptist Church in Rhode Island formed an association in 715. Rhode Island was a stronghold of religious freedom. This association was early evidence of, and here it is, Baptist cooperation. Okay, it is cooperation. In fact, even in the Southern Baptist Convention today, they have the cooperative program. Yeah, with its cooperative fund. And that's how these things are put. They're cooperating. It's not dues paying, not fee paying. The General Sixth Principle Baptist Association, based in Newport, Rhode Island, was established in 1701, and it was an association that represented a branch of the Baptist movement with distinctive views. I do not know what the Six Principles. I'd have to look that up. Okay, so as a result of the Great Awakening and the revivalist movement, Baptists flourished under the guarantees of freedom in the United States of America. So there is going to come that time of flourishing after the Great Awakening, and in a state where, and when I say state, I mean the whole state of the U.S. colonies. In a state that's poised for creating churches with religious freedom, the Great Awakening would end up fueling them like crazy. Okay, now, this next bold point down here, the Enlightenment. In the meanwhile, over on the other side of the campus, okay, we've got, so far, we've had all kinds of religious activity. You had the Protestants fighting for control of their areas and saying, Church at Rome, leave us alone. We want to develop on our own. Okay, so you're getting the breakup of things. You've got, because of the arguing going back and forth over that, these Protestant churches ended up creating a creedalism, and I believe I mentioned creedalism somewhere in the book. Creedalism is where you subscribe to a creed in order to belong to it. So if there was a Baptist creed, we would say, okay, before you can claim that you're a Baptist, do you subscribe to the Baptist creed that we all agreed to? So that the creed takes the place of the dogma and tradition of the Catholic Church. It's only it's the same kind of animal, just a different color. And so because of that fighting and some stagnation, in fact, over on page 184, with paragraph 512 at the end, it talks about the formula of Concord had only reinforced a stagnant orthodoxy. Formula of Concord was in Germany. Okay, so this is a good time to remind us that in response to the stagnation that the Protestant movement was bringing about. I mean, the Protestant movement, I've said this on a number of occasions, the Protestant movement did great to try to reestablish justification by faith and eternal security and things like that. They were still fighting over things they couldn't quite seem to come to agreement over, like what the nature of communion was. Was it transubstantiation, or was Christ present in it, or was it only a remembrance? And so they had arguments like that. But they were so caught up in trying to enforce their creeds, they had an unfortunate consequence where people got fed up with that and they wanted to get a more spiritual relationship. And that's when I mentioned German pietism. German pietism emphasized practical Christianity, where it would sort of approach the idea of having a social gospel. They wanted to talk about one's personal experience, and it became more individualized. Like, what are you getting from the Lord? Which is a good thing. You know, we like to do that. We like to say that. How is the Lord influencing you? But the movement ended up sort of diminishing the churches in favor of what would be too much individualization. And with that problem in place, you had also the Renaissance, where new ideas were coming in. So with this idea of doing personal study, personal exploration, coupled with all of the new information in the Renaissance, people started looking into philosophy and science more. And they started developing a hyper-rationalism. Being rational is good. Rationalism as a philosophy is a problem, because rationalism says, forget the mystical experience. Forget the Bible. Okay, this is what they go to. And that's exactly what happened when the Enlightenment finally hit France, and it produced the Reign of Terror, which we'll get into all that a little bit later on. So on the other side of the campus, while you had these people bickering and arguing and trying to compensate for it, to have greater freedom, greater spiritual freedom, they ended up starting more schools and influencing education and having people feeling free to do that. Well, with that came the philosophies, and now you've got the Enlightenment. So the Enlightenment, this is paragraph 601. The Enlightenment and its effects will be more thoroughly discussed later, but the seeds of the Enlightenment took root under the influence of the events of this age. So all those events are influencing what's going to come about. Okay, now this next part, let me just read. This is from the internet. The roots of the Enlightenment can be found in the turmoil of the English civil wars, with the reestablishment of a largely unchanged autocratic monarchy, first with the restoration of Charles II and the ascendancy of James II. Leading political thinkers began to reappraise how society and politics could and should be better structured. See, they're wanting to fight the autocratic monarchy. So let's find a different way to do this. So movements for political change resulted in the Glorious Revolution of 1688 and 89. It was called glorious because William and Mary were invited to come over and to take charge, and it was called glorious because there was no blood shed. Okay, it was a totally peaceful revolution when William and Mary were installed on the throne as part of the new Protestant settlement. The ancient civilizations of Greece and Rome were revered by enlightened thinkers. See how I said they were going back to philosophy, and now they're analyzing philosophy more and not just church dogma. These thinkers who viewed these communities as potential models for how modern society could be organized. Many commentators of the late 17th century were eager to achieve a clean break from what they saw as centuries of political tyranny in favor of personal freedoms and happiness centered on the individual. This is key stuff here. Chief among these thinkers was philosopher and physician John Locke, whose two treatises of government advocated a separation of church and state, religious toleration, the right to property ownership, and a contractual obligation on government to recognize the innate rights of the people. If you want to do some political reading and you want to understand the foundation of America, you would want to know about John Locke. So underline that and then look up on Wikipedia, okay, the influence of John Locke. So he's one of your key figures that was influencing people like Thomas Jefferson. Locke believed that reason and human consciousness were the gateways to contentment and liberty, and he demolished the notion that human knowledge was somehow pre-programmed and mystical. Locke's ideas reflected the earlier but equally influential works of Thomas Hobbes. He's another key figure if you want to underline that and look him up on Wikipedia, which similarly advocated new social contracts between the state and civil society as the key to unlocking personal happiness for all. Notice the emphasis on personal happiness, personal experience. Okay. You can read on your own the effect that this had, like on Copernicus in paragraph 602 and 603. Let's jump down to paragraph 604. So the open examination of the Renaissance, remember the Renaissance is coming along with the Protestant movements. You know, people are now examining things. Okay, so that kicked off an inquiry not only in art, literature, and philosophy, but also in science and politics. The great problem that will come from the Enlightenment is that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Some in the church will try to accommodate immature science. This is how Darwin gets accepted. It was like, oh, here's a new way of thinking, okay, and this sounds scientific, when everything that Darwin wrote was maybe this and maybe that and looks like this. He was really not scientific at all. But preachers were like, oh, what do we do with this? I guess we got to find some way to accommodate it. And so this Enlightenment thinking is going to infect the churches, leading people to liberalism and challenging the Bible. Mr. Joe.
Yeah, if I can just add, you said he wasn't a scientist. He was actually a theologian.
Oh, okay.
He was studying for the Church of England, and I don't think he had any real convictions about belief, but sadly, I guess at that time and as well as today, you didn't necessarily have to be a grounded believer to run a church, and it was just looked upon as a job. You know, it was looked upon as a job that, you know, was respectful, but, you know, whatever convictions you had didn't really qualify you or disqualify you.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's read 1 Timothy along those lines, 6:20-21. O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called, which some professing have erred concerning the faith. Grace be with thee. And so this is going to lead people to base their spirituality on doubt and skepticism as an excuse for the rebellion against God. And that is what characterized the Enlightenment. I bristle every time I read the Enlightenment because a lot of modern day commentators and pundits talk about the Enlightenment and how wonderful it was. The Enlightenment was not enlightening. It was darkening, if anything. And proof of it was in the French Revolution. Which we will, when we get to that, we'll have an awful lot to say about that. So it's been said that in reality, once restraints, and I'm just reading from other notes I read today. Yes, Nancy. Darwin. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a side note. That's my ad-libbing. Okay, so from some stuff I prepared on the side for today, it said, in reality, once restraints were removed, Oh, and let's do this. The problem of human nature. Enlightenment thinkers generally had an optimistic view of human nature. Silly Enlightenment people, optimistic view. That people would naturally act rationally and morally if freed from oppression. I don't know. I mean, it seems to me in ministry, you're dealing with all kinds of people all over the place, all different stratas of society. There's a lot of stupidity out there. And this is really, I mean, how somebody could think that people would naturally act rationally, I cannot imagine that they had much interaction with humanity. And morally, if freed from oppression. In fact, that you might recognize that argument that's used today from communist influence that, well, poor people, they resort to crime because they have to, because they don't have much money. If we gave them more money, well, then they wouldn't need to go to crime. No, people go to crime because it's a lot of fun. They like to beat up people. It gives them a thrill. And they like the challenge of cheating others and seeing what they can get away with and how clever they are. People are people, and this is the problem. So you can't just give people money, as in today, and say, okay, that'll solve the crime problem. No, it increases the crime problem because then people think that they're owed things, and then they think that they then have a right to take things that they're owed because the government's working too slow. In reality, once restraints were removed, violence, factionalism, and power struggles surged. The French Revolution descended into mob rule, summary executions, mass paranoia, and widespread bloodshed, culminating in the guillotine culture of the terror. Okay. When taken to ideological extremes, divorced from moral absolutes, because remember, in the Enlightenment, you're getting away from the church, and this was done big time in the French Revolution. They wanted to knock down the power of the elite. They wanted to knock down the power of the church and restore it to, quote unquote, the people. So without the spiritual foundation, guided only by human reason and revolutionary zeal, they helped pave the way for the fanaticism and violence of the Reign of Terror. De Tocqueville, every once in a while you can see quotes from him. He's somebody worth reading. He came to America after the Enlightenment time, and he wanted to see what was going on in America. And he had a lot of observations. One of the things that I know that de Tocqueville noticed was the spiritual power of America and how this was where the real power was in America. He said, Alexis de Tocqueville analyzed how Enlightenment thought led to radical revolution. He noted how Enlightenment Enlightenment philosophs weakened respect for all traditional authority. He saw the revolution not as a sudden event, but the outcome of decades of philosophical erosion. He observed that a desire for equality taken to an absolute led to state tyranny. The state became all-powerful, replacing the monarchy with an even more absolute authority under the guise of the people. When we first came to People's Baptist Church, we had issues with the name People's Baptist, because not only had Jim Jones had the People's Temple down in Guyana, but also everything was the People's this, the People's Army, the People's Republic of this, and the People's Republic of that. And in fact, People's Baptist Church was known for ministering to the blue-collar workers of the area, all of the tanks that were here and the refinement that was going on. And in fact, it was not even called People's Baptist Church at first. It was originally called People's Church, the People's Church. And then early on, and I have the documents upstairs, early on they went through a name change to say the People's Baptist church. So the idea of the people's everything. So whenever you hear that and you think, oh, communism, well, yeah, that's the excuse. It's the people's country, and we're respecting the rights of the people, but they can't represent themselves. So we'll do it for them. And so you raise a whole new elite that takes the place of the monarchy. Yes, Brother Tone.
Just one quick clarification. Our peoples does not have an apostrophe,
Right.
meaning a congregation of different nations and people.
Yes.
Not the communist way of using the word people to mean the communist Politburo as the leader of the people, the vanguard of the revolution.
Exactly. And if you go back in history, people don't know exactly how to spell it, and they'll spell it sometimes. The church that belongs to the people, no, it's peoples without an apostrophe that were made up of different peoples. Look around you. Okay, even here today. Okay, we have different people groups that are represented, and not in the name of all the people. But now, why we ended up, liking the name People's Baptist Church after all was because when it came time to transfer the property and things like that back in 1985, I thought, well, we don't need to go through forming a whole new church, and do that. We'll just work together. The Old People's Baptist Church paper joined with the congregation of what we were calling Bayonne Baptist Church at the time. So that's how we ended up loving peoples. So we're going to stop with that. We're going to look at page 212 the next time, how the Sardis church age became dead. We'll see that. But right now, what we're looking at is how you can have the individual freedom. Unfortunately, because of the other factors that were going on, this was also a ripe time for the Enlightenment to start taking off and running competition with the churches. Do we hate the idea of the Enlightenment? No, we recognize this is just one of the problems of a free society. Okay? We want to defend their freedom as long as they defend our freedom too. The answer is not to censor speech, it's not to shut down speech, it's to promote speech, and we better speak up if we want to compete in this world. Okay, not by shutting them down, but by having better arguments than them. Okay, and so again, this section is talking about how Baptists started now to grow, and we'll just have a little bit more to do. Maybe we'll finish off the rest of the section next week, I hope, and then before getting into the Philadelphia age, because now we're at the brink of the Philadelphia age and the explosion of Christianity. I don't know if you might recognize, and I really wanted to pray about what was happening, from last night and what's going on in Iran, and I wanted to pray this morning especially about how Iran, I don't know that they're going to go through a revolution and get freedom of speech, but it would be interesting if is it Shiite faction? I can't remember the Shia or Sharia. Anyhow, I think it's the Shiite Muslims. If I'm wrong, whatever. If their power can be broken, there are supposed to be Christians and an underground church in Iran. It makes up less than 1% of the population. But it would be interesting if there was a crack in there that enabled some kind of more Christian activity. And the Christian activity that I know of there is not necessarily our kind of Christianity, but we'll see what happens. So it's not just pray for the president and his counselors to have well-founded reasoning and to stop the hysterics of the left. It's also to recognize, hey, what could this mean for the region over there? Brother Joe.
I was listening recently to I think it was a missionary over there, and I didn't catch all the details, but from what I understood, they're getting a lot more inquiries about who Jesus is. They really want to know. They're tired of the oppression. They're tired of, the religion that proclaims peace but does anything but. And they see that. They see where it goes. And I think one of the missionaries said something to the effect that if they could go out into the open field and just preach, the open air and just preach, he thinks that revival, he thinks that they're just ripe for revival. I don't know that that's true or not, but just from all the rumblings that are going on, and actually you were not in the Sunday school this morning, but, of course the government takes surveys and they say, that 99.5% of the country is Muslim. Well, of course it is if they say, are you a Muslim? And you say no, and then they kill you.
Yeah.
So you have kind of like a reason to say yes. But from what also heard that there was a more secretive poll where they were, allowing people to, give their answers anonymously. And the figure seems to be more like only 45% of the country consider themselves to still be Muslim. I think if, based on the numbers and I guess the extrapolations and everything, but they believe that this might be the first time in whatever that less than half the country is Muslim.
Yeah. From what I understand, the Shah of Iran, before he got kicked out, he was kicked out because, if I remember correctly, that they were becoming more westernized, and this was being objected to by the 7th century mindset of Islam, and so they wanted to bring it back to that. But that this is something I understand. I think I've heard, maybe others can confirm it, that the Iranian people can actually be very much different and much more friendly and all. And what you were just saying is not unprecedented. What we saw in early America, if you wanted to preach, you had to have permission of the local bishop of the area. And so some of these guys would be preaching out in fields, not necessarily because they could fit more people, okay, but because they didn't have any pulpit that they were allowed to take up. So once America got rid of that oppression that the Protestants and others were trying to establish, that open air preaching would be hopefully about the same thing what could go on there. Yeah, a great awakening, a great Iranian awakening, Brother Tone, yeah.
I read in some articles that the Mossad succeeded very well in this conflict only because they have Jewish people still in Iran. Not all Jewish people migrated back to Israel. They remain there, and although they seem to have blended with the Persian society, they're really God's unique people. They remain, and that's the reason why silently through the months the Mossad were able to manufacture bring in the things, the things that they needed to construct these drones from the inside, and the Mossad maintained a very precise intelligence of all the situations there in Persia. How is this possible? Because they're Jews and they want their homeland is under attack, and they cooperated with the Netanyahu administration for collecting this data. Mm-hmm. So it's not really only the Christian influence there that's making things turn around. It's also the Jewish population, Pastor. The diaspora people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is one of the reasons for going into history so much. How am I doing on time? Doing okay. One of the things that I like about history so much is when you start finding these details out, and you probably heard of Enlightenment back in high school or something like that, but when you start to piece these things together and see how they're connected, it's like marvelous to see God's work and God's timing. And he knew all about it from the age of Sardis and the age of Philadelphia, and it was being predicted.